Two trained professionals can review the same case and reach sharply different conclusions within minutes, which can make the process unfair even without bad intent. These differences can arise from various factors, including interpretation of evidence and personal biases. Standardizing review processes and training can help minimize such discrepancies. Consistent application of guidelines and protocols can ensure fairness and consistency. Peer review and regular feedback sessions can also improve the reliability of the process. Clear documentation of the review process and rationale can provide transparency and accountability. Implementing technology solutions like AI can further standardize and improve the accuracy of reviews. Regular audits and evaluations of the review process can identify and address potential biases. Encouraging open communication and collaboration among reviewers can enhance the quality of the process. Ensuring that all reviewers are well-trained and up-to-date with the latest information is crucial. Error is the distance between a judgment and the truth, consisting of two independent parts. Bias is a consistent push in one direction, while noise is an unpredictable scatter around the average. A system may appear acceptable on average, but still harm individuals due to widely varying outcomes. Since noise is harder to detect, organizations often focus on visible bias while ignoring the variability that creates the same error rate. Imagine repeated judgments as darts at a target. The cluster may be centered but widely spread. Reducing scatter makes each decision safer, even if the average position barely changes. Once variability is the focus, improving judgment means designing systems, not just training individuals to be more careful. The goal is to raise the signal above the noise, so true differences in cases drive outcomes more than personal style. Start by asking where the same case could be judged differently by various people and how often this occurs. If you can measure disagreement in these hotspots, you can decide whether to address bias, noise, or both first. System noise is the variation between judges who apply the same rules, even when they see identical cases. It includes level noise, where some judges are consistently harsher, and pattern noise, where they react differently to details. Level noise shifts whole groups upward or downward, so two communities can face different standards without realizing it. Pattern noise makes outcomes unstable within one community, because the same fact pattern can trigger opposite reactions. In settings like courts, people who look similar on paper can receive sharply different outcomes from different decision makers. Even one judge can vary across occasions, as mood and context change the same evaluation over time. Seeing these components clarifies why training alone rarely fixes the problem, since the variability is baked into the system. Reducing noise means choosing tools that match the source, whether that source is differences between people or differences within one person. When a decision feels high stakes, build checkpoints that slow the final call and separate fact-finding from evaluation. When time allows, revisit the same judgment later or seek a second opinion, then compare the differences for clues. Group discussions often feel like a cure for error, but they can amplify noise when opinions shape each other. The mechanism is social influence, where early confident voices steer what evidence gets noticed and how it gets weighted. Once a shared narrative forms, dissent feels costly, and the final decision reflects group dynamics rather than independent analysis. This creates false agreement because people converge on a number, yet the convergence comes from pressure, not accuracy. A better approach is to collect private estimates first, reveal the spread, and only then invite discussion focused on the disagreements. After the discussion, people estimate again, and the final result is the average of those second estimates. This keeps the benefits of deliberation while protecting independence, which is necessary for aggregation to reduce noise. It also makes uncertainty visible, so leaders can see when the problem is genuine ambiguity instead of sloppy thinking. In your next meeting, separate individual scoring from group debate and require each rating to be justified with specific facts. If reducing disagreement feels urgent, subscribe to learn meeting routines that protect independence and make final calls fairer. A noise audit measures how much judgments vary when multiple qualified people evaluate the same set of cases. The mechanism is simple replication. Identical materials are rated independently, then the spread is calculated and discussed. Without this measurement, decision makers assume consistency and never see that outcomes depend on who happens to decide. With it, leaders can identify judgment lotteries and target the parts of the process that create the widest swings. In one insurance company, Different underwriters reviewed the same policy, and some approved it about half the time. Others approved the identical policy rarely, which shows how a single assignment can shift a customer's fate. Once the variation is visible, improvement becomes a design problem, because training alone cannot erase large spreads. The audit also creates a shared language for consistency, making it easier to discuss standards without blaming individuals. Run a small audit on the decisions that matter most, using 10 to 20 cases that represent common situations. Then use the results to choose concrete fixes such as clearer criteria, better sequencing, or aggregation of independent ratings. Decision hygiene is a set of procedures that reduces noise by structuring how evidence is gathered and evaluated. It works by limiting premature intuition, separating tasks, and keeping judgments independent until the right moment. When a team follows the same clean steps, outcomes become more consistent, and disagreements reveal real uncertainty instead of noise. This also improves learning, as feedback links to specific steps rather than vague impressions about who is a good judge. One practical method is to break complex judgments into a sequence of simpler judgments, each anchored to defined questions. Another trade-off involves choosing between flexible standards and fixed rules, where rules cut noise but can feel less humane. In some domains, a simple predictive rule can outperform human discretion, as it is consistent and uses the same inputs every time. The best systems decide deliberately where judgment is essential and where a rule or algorithm should handle routine cases. Build a checklist that forces a pause, orders the evidence, and requires a written reason before any final rating. When the stakes are high, combine decision hygiene with aggregation, so the final decision reflects shared facts more than personal style. Better judgment is not only about removing bias, but also about reducing the random spread that often goes unnoticed. When noise decreases, people with similar cases receive more consistent treatment, making results easier to defend and explain. Start by distinguishing bias from noise, then determine whether the main issue is systematic differences or occasional fluctuations. Next, ensure independence in group work, measure variability through audits, and apply decision hygiene that structures each step. Consistency builds trust, as people see the process responding to evidence rather than personal preferences. It also saves effort, as fewer decisions require appeals, rework, or defensive documentation to justify an outcome. Choose a recurring judgment, define the key facts, and run 2 independent ratings to check for the presence of noise. If ratings differ, introduce simple structure first, then consider rules or averaging when discretion continues to produce large gaps. Reducing noise is both a fairness and a performance move, as it makes judgments reliable enough to learn from. To achieve clearer judgments with fewer hidden uncertainties, subscribe for practical hygiene steps you can apply this week.